Good morning, YouTube. It's been a long time, well, 3-4 months, I think, 3-4 weeks that I've actually made a video. You know, with the virus going around, work, and then on Blueprint, we've been very busy. Just want to make an update. There's been a huge changes to my goal for what I wanted to do with the Quicksilver. And I think most of you appreciate the changes. So let's start with the changes and what the changes to. So by the way, this is, you guys remember Ninja One, the red Evo that had a 72-75. So the owner is, you know, a really good friend and then very big enthusiast in the Evo world, and he wants everything. So what ended up happening is we transferred a lot of the stuff from the Quicksilver to this car. And the reason is, while building the two, we realized that we're actually making redundant cars. These cars were built almost exactly the same. They had, you know, the turbo was different, and a few other things. One was the Evo 9, one was the Evo 8. And I felt like that's waste of, I think, opportunity for the channel and for viewers, having two very similar cars making the same amount of power on two different turbo kits. That is just, I think, stupid. I don't want to do that. And after I made my last video, the owner saw the video and basically wanted my setup. So that's basically what we did. There are a few differences. See, this is my turbo kit made by Morrison Fabrication. The G42, same intercooler. This is the Evo 9. The bottom end is mine. It's an Evo 9 head. He has the same setup for the mechanical fuel pump. One of the few reasons why I actually wanted to do this, and I was okay with doing it, is because on that car with the 4 injectors, I wouldn't be able to max out this turbo using E85. Now, a lot of people say, yeah. I'm sorry, I don't think so. You would have to end up mixing fuel like with race fuel or something to actually max out this turbo. So this car actually has 8 injectors, and he has the same setup. You see the surge tank right there as mine, exactly same thing. The ECU is also AEM Infinity, but 508, so you can run the 8 injectors. So basically we're getting my setup here with the Evo 9 head and the 8 injectors. And what we did with our car, when we transferred everything over to this car, it left a void, obviously. And a lot of you will appreciate this. We put a JDM Evo 8 engine in here. Well, obviously you can't see it right now, but everything is mostly made for the stock stuff. I have a 450 in the back. I took off the mechanical. It has stock head, stock bottom end. You know, obviously I'm running an SD. I changed to stock intake manifold. I'm still running the FIC 2150s. Kept the catch can setup and the ignition coils. And a stock Evo 8 JDM turbo. I went with the full radiator, 3-inch ETS intercooler, as I mentioned, 450, and still a 506 Infinity AEM EMS. Now, this gives us a really good opportunity for really good content, and I think a lot of people will appreciate this, which is we could still get, when I say we, I mean, you know, not only the shop people who are viewing this, you could still see the progress, what it takes to get, you know, max out that turbo to get to the 4 digits on this car. And I could do tunes, stock modifications, bolt-ons, whatever you call it, but comparing two ECUs, the stock ECU versus the AEM ECU. And I'll show all throughout how I'm tuning both and what the results are. And I think that makes for great content, and a lot of people are going to have questions and whatnot. And I believe most of us, 90% of all cars are like this. It's just bolt-ons and whatnot. So that's what we have decided to do. And I think it'll save, well, it'll open up opportunities for great content, and we'll still get to get that high horsepower and basically a stock one. I also want to update on a few other project cars. This is a friend of mine. He has a 86 HT 86 old school, but it's an awesome turbo. That's one of my favorite turbos. He blew his head gasket, so he brought it here. Do you remember Marco's car? We don't know what we're gonna call it yet, but you know, I love murdered out cars. This car is just ridiculous. You guys saw the video on building the engine, the one that I was building while I was really, really hungry and waiting for sushi. And the aluminum rods, it's PTE 6870 turbo. As you can see, we're almost close to finishing it up. I think this is gonna make close to 1,000 horsepower, maybe a little bit less, but very excited for this car coming up very soon. So yeah, I wanted to update people on that, and updates on the wheels too. So running these 275s, I'm okay in the front, but the back, as you can see, I'm rubbing. So today I'm gonna get my fenders rolled, and I think that'll take care of that. It's not rubbing like crazy, but it is still rubbing. I got the interior back together. As you can see, it's a beautiful car, and I still have the CD7, no rust whatsoever. And you know what? As I'm doing bolt-ons and everything, I am gonna end up selling the car because I really want another project car other than Evos, because I have access to so many Evos here, and I really don't drive these cars. I literally just buy them, I'm working on them, make the videos, and leave it here. So anyone interested, looking for a clean Evo, whatnot, hit me up. We'll talk about pricing, but until then, I am definitely gonna just do bolt-ons, tune them, and I show you how I tune the aftermarket ECU versus stock ECU and what the difference is, if there's any benefits or at all. And that's basically it. Stay tuned. So as a second part to the video, I wanted to talk a little bit about, or actually compare, how we create a base map on Evos, comparing two ECUs, which is one is stock, the other one is AEM Infinity. So to actually create a base map so we can start tuning, we need to know our modifications. So let's talk about the modifications that are actually on the Quicksilver, and we can go down the list each mod and how to tune it in the system. And I'm going to cover everything here that's on this car. Now, some of them doesn't need to be tuned. Some mods do. So Walbro 450, that's not going to be direct tuning if you have one of those. If you have a stock lines on this on your car and you have a Walbro 450, you might want to mod the return line in the fuel tank and the hanger, because it builds up a lot of pressure and doesn't allow the fuel pressure regulator to actually regulate efficiently the fuel pressure, because it's just too much volume. So this is not going to be a direct tune in the ECU for the Walbro pump, but it just makes sure that you will get good fuel there. It is, however, in the AEM, you can tune your fuel pumps directly with the ECU. On the stock ECU, you could, but it's just like more like an on and off switch for high and low flow, and it's not as tunable as it is on the AEM. But for our purposes, just to get the car going, this is something that we're not gonna tune directly. We're gonna tune it through the injectors. Now, this car does have a 8 feed and a 6 AN return for the fuel, which is great because it's making sure it's getting the volume that it needs. Fuel rail, AEM fuel rail, it's same thing. It's not going to be tuned directly, but it does make things easier for the engine to receive the fuel. Fuel pressure regulator. This is not a tuned to the ECU, but you do have to mechanically tune it. And the way you do that is you turn the car on, you make sure the vacuum is blocked off to the fuel pressure regulator so it's not running off a vacuum, and you want to set it at the base PSI that you want. Typically it's 43 PSI. Then you reconnect the vacuum, and while you disconnect the vacuum, make sure the vacuum isn't leaking, so you got to hold it or clamp it or something. This does have a stock engine with the stock turbo Evo 8. The transmission is built, so is the transfer case, but it's a stock build. It's not a dog box. Basically, all the gears have been looked over, the synchros, the sleeves, everything has been changed. Transfer case, same thing, and it has a Wave Trek LSD. Now, you don't tune this directly, but you could tune the AYC. There is a separate AYC tunable maps and programs for this, which you can do. But again, I personally feel this requires track data and feedback from how the car is driving in the track. Otherwise, it's really not worth it. The cam gears, there's no electronic tune for them, but you do put it on the dyno, and you retard or advance the timing and see where the graph moves to the left or the right, meaning does the torque come on earlier, you want to come later, you want mid-range power, you want top-end power. You would basically adjust it, but nothing to do with the ECU. Harmonic balancer, same thing, not direct. It does have a fluid damper, but it does play in a part with, I guess, minimizing knock noise, but we'll get into that later. All timing components is new, so that's great. Nothing, I don't have a 12-tooth ignition pickup, because if I did, that would have been, I guess a little bit more complicated to set up with the AEM. The stock ECU cannot run 12-tooth Kigleys or anything else. It has to run the stock. So if you're using a stock ECU, just know that. The catch can has to 10 AN 4-vent catch, which is great, but nothing to tune. Wheels and tires, again, this would probably come into the AYC tuning. Ignition coils. This has the AEM IGN N1 ignition coils, which is great. It gives you a lot of, I guess, spark energy. A little side note, if you do a research, the stock, I think, is like 20 megajoules up to. The very favorite and most common aftermarket COP setup is like 24, 25 megajoules. We started using the GTR coils. Those are 50 megajoules, which is great. That'll get you into 1,000 horsepower. And the AEM IGN coils and most IGN N1 coils are around 100, which is double that. So you're good on power. 2.5 upper intercooler piping. It's more for airflow. It's not going to really play that much of a big deal on our base map. But yeah, you do have to adjust some tuning on idle and things like that. ETS 3-inch intercooler. It's a larger, more efficient intercooler than the stock. So yeah, you would be adjusting it during wide open throttles and things like that. But as far as base goes, no. Oil cooler, nothing really to tune here. CD7 race cluster, yes. If you're using it on the stock ECU, you would have to use a, I think they call it CAN expansion or something like that, where you would hook it up to your sensors directly to it and it to the CD7 so it could read everything. EM Infinity 506, obviously that requires tuning. Speed density, yes, it has an EM5 bar, we'll be tuning that. And triple disc, yes and no. So I would say there's a part of the clutch that I do tune, only during takeoff or tip in, as they call it. And that's basically it, and sometimes cruise. But other than that, no. So that is our tunable tables. So let's go and get into that. Now, let me delete some things that we're not going to be tuning. So we know when we come back, address this in and we're not lost on what step we're in. Okay, so I'm gonna leave the AEM CD7 and 506 in there. I'm gonna take this out and okay. So these are basically our setup. Oh, I forgot to put in our IAT is AEM Pro IAT. What else? What else we got? That's basically it, right? And our injectors are FIC 2150, big item here. Those are what we're basically going to be tuning right now. Okay, so let's start with our stock tables. So here we go. First thing coming here, SD map versus VE calibration. If you guys remember how to set up SD, this covers that. You go into edit definitions, this is the stock map, and you make sure you have chosen Calvino 5-bar. If you are an Omni 4-bar, you choose the 4-bar, but we're in a 5-bar, so we're going to choose the 5-bar. What this does is this adjusts the scaling factor on these here. When you do that, I like to start with left and right side, which is 1-to-1 ratio, the same. And then this, I just scale it up to, you know, what is it, 550 load that it can read up to. I know that's 400. Let's just do 400. I'm basically telling the computer just messed up there. Okay, let's adjust this 400. And at 400, I wanted to read 450 kPa. So it gets a little richer on top. So that's one component down. This is the VE table. Versus RPM, you set it to whatever you think the stock one does. And then what's the next item? That's the map 5-bar we have done. That's good. And then the IAT. So you literally just go to aem.com and look up the PDF, and it gives you scaling. And once that's done, you come to the stock map here, and there's a IAT table, map to IAT, and you basically scale based on voltages here. And that's basically it. You do have to turn on that you want to use the IAT and not the fuel. If you set it to 03, it's going to use the IAT connected at the MAF, and if you put OE, it's going to use your fuel temperature sensor as your manifold absolute temperature to calculate for SD. And then your fuel injector, your base latency, you literally just Google this, and there's a bunch of information available on this. FIC 2150s, incidentally, they kind of tune the same as ID 2000, so you could use the latencies for that. I know for the 14 volts, I remember off the top of my head, it's 0.04, and then you could just scale and follow whatever. I think this was 350 or something like that. This is just a base. You have to adjust this. And minimum IPW. On this, there's a lot of debate about this. I like to start with 1.024. You could go up to 1. I wouldn't put it below 1. That's the bare minimum of pulsation that it'll actually, on idle, that it'll stay open. It gets harder to control below that. And you have to turn these on. In order for the system to use this table for your minimum IPW instead of the stock one. You have to turn these 3 tables on, and you do that by going in here and you put in 0x9000. Well, I put 0x9000, and you basically do that for all 3 tables, and it'll start using this table for your minimum IPW. You would leave this alone for now, map compensation and all this stuff, because when you download the SD map from Tefra's website, some of them come pre-scaled for the stock system. So I would just go with that and adjust as you need. The second part to injectors is you go to global fuel. Let's see, where is that? Main fuel table, injector size right here. And we start, these injectors are 2150s, but I start with 1624 and work my way up or down as the car needs based on logging. The third thing I do with this is the cranking table for injectors. On this, let's see, where is that? Here, injector cranking starter, main. So a lot of people put a quarter of whatever this is, because remember, this is for your stock injectors, which is 4 times smaller than the FIC 2150. So if your injector is 4 times smaller or 4 times larger, you would multiply that by 25%. If it's 2 times, for example, ID 1000s, you would just multiply this by half. But I actually, on FIC 2150s, I actually leave it half, not a quarter. And this works great. And that's for injectors on the Stock ECU. Let's do the same thing on AEM and see what that looks like. So far we have done, so far we have done the IAT and the SD setup. Basically, that's what we're doing with the 5-bar. Now the Infinity Tuner base map, it's a little bit complicated. So if you are running one, you open your Infinity Tuner, you go open a save session, and I would 100% start with stock base map. They have a bunch. So let's go in here, documents, AEM, Infinity Tuner, sessions, base sessions, V3. There's a couple of versions. I like using V3. So you have a 503 or 508, that's what you use. You have an Evo 8, that's what you use. Now, this comes pretty well defined from factory. So I would personally just stick to these values and just only change what you changed. So on this, you're going to be living in Wizard, which is great because we don't have that on the Stock ECU. So you go to Wizard the first time you set it up, and then you keep it on WasteSpark if you have WasteSpark. If you do not, if you're using sequential and has to be wired correctly for that, you would obviously put it to sequential by going in here. So leave this on WasteSpark. Injector Setup. I'm just going to go directly into that. Now you're using gasoline. There are options to do flex fuel, ethanol, E85, methanol, whatever you want, but we're on gasoline for now. So let's leave it on gasoline. Fuel properties, I would turn this to, instead of 14.7, I would put the 14.5. That works pretty great because if you remember, the 93 octane that you get is not exactly full ethanol. I'm sorry, full octane fuel. It's actually 10% ethanol. So I like to use the 14.5 as my Stokio. And this is how simple it is to do injector here. Drop down and literally choose what your injector is. If it's not on the list, you can look up from the injector manufacturer and you start there. But it autofills everything that you need. And to do other sensors, you go into basic sensors, and you double click whichever sensor you want to replace here. And then, yeah, I'm using the 381, and there is a 181, so I'm using actually the 181, so this is the Pro. And it automatically changes the scaling on the right to whatever sensor. Some people are saying, hey, what if I don't have the sensor? You know, you need to basically buy, to make things easier, the sensor, whatever else you're buying that's not on the list. I mean, there's absolutely no reason for you to go with anything else. I would personally just go with whatever's on the list and make your life easier. And that's basically how you set up sensors here. I mean, obviously there's more during the actual tuning, but we're doing base map now. So far we set up the SD sensors, and let's see what else we got here. The fuel pump, blah, 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 blah. The CD7 has its own program, and okay, so I think now talk about what exactly we need for other. My car is actually, it doesn't have cams, so I'm lucky that I don't have to tune these step motors and all this other stuff. But I do adjust the timing just a little bit, so the cranking part is easier. So let's go into the timing. Okay, I will set this up a little higher, just so it can idle a little high and I can work it down afterwards, just so it starts initially. And for Exetti triple, I would, throttle up on this, just add maybe like 1 or 2 degrees. It does help the tip in because it creates a little bit more power. On the AEM, it's pretty similar. You go into the ignition maps, again, boost, you're most likely going to be here during your tip in. You just add a little bit more timing. You could do it through the ignition trims based on TPS and everything else, but that's just one way of doing it. This is another way. So again, without getting into too much details, modding, this is how to set up the SD on stock map versus Infinity. Again, this is very, very basic. I'm not really diving really deep into this, and I could. There's so much more to this, but that's a separate video. We don't have time today. So that's basically how you would set up the injectors and your AEM 5-bar and your IAT. For the stock ECUs, that's basically what you need, because most of it you're just downloading already preset. I think next map we'll do, one step at a time, the progression of how you get a car started and go from there to actual tuning. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to end the video here. Next up, I think we're going to do actual start and idle and a comparison. I do need data logs for that. So we'll look forward to it for next week. And thank you so much for people who have subscribed, been with me, and continue to be with me. And the comments, I love them. Keep them coming. There's a big change with, obviously, to this Quicksilver, but I'm really happy that I'm able to do 2 things at once. The Ninja car, which has my setup now with the G42 and the 8 injectors, it's almost done. We're just wiring up the ignition coils and the 8 injectors, and it should be good to go by next week. If you guys have any questions, any feedbacks, let me know what you guys want to see. There's a lot to cover. I cannot do this in one video, and I appreciate that you guys are letting me know actively what you guys want to see. Well, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.